one, which was about 10 days before the major event, where I just felt really, really dizzy. My partner had finished making dinner. He was doing the dishes because he's a saint. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go to the bedroom. And we have a lovely, it's not like a long like mansion hallway, but it's a substantial hallway. And I made it down half the hallway, and then he found me sitting in like the guest room office, and he was kind of like, hi, why are you in here? Nothing good is in here. Why are you here? And I was just sitting there, and I was like, I don't know, I just feel really, really dizzy. And I justified it by like, oh, this is a really busy week, and I haven't been eating or sleeping or whatever. I've been burning the candle at both ends. And I kind of ignored it. He did check in and say, like, do you want to go to the hospital? He gave me a nice little cool compress, but we hung out and it passed. But during that whole week, I had periods where I sort of just didn't make memories, which is sketchy, but it was the busiest week of my life. And I was that week, and then like in the following couple of weeks, I had 4 burlesque acts, completely different acts, 2 of which I was premiering. So I was like, and one of which was choreographed with a number of other people. So I was always rehearsing, and when I wasn't rehearsing, I was working. And I did a couple podcasts that week, and I also did some of my own podcasts, and yeah, just and then putting sequins on everything all the time. So I didn't pay attention to that. And actually, the night before the stroke, I was with Andrew Gurza at the Best Sex Writing opening, and I was doing an act. And as you know, in burlesque, the way you know it went well is because the clothing came off. And at the end, you look down and you're like, well, maybe I wasn't the most poised. Maybe it didn't go exactly as I'd like, but it sure seems like the clothing came off.
Yeah, I did the thing.
And so I didn't make a memory of my time on stage.
Wow.
But I was off stage with my stuff, and I was like,
I guess that
it happened. And then I was heading home with Andrew at about midnight, and we were talking about sex and disability, and I was like, I'd love to like signal boost and talk to you about stuff and like have you on the show and do this and do that. But I just know it isn't really my place to talk about, so I feel limited in that respect, and I want to kind of take the lead from you.
Give you a platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still believe in that, but it's 6:00 in the morning, so 6 hours later, I had the second and third of the 3 strokes that I would apparently have. So that was the second event, and my partner left super early for work because he had to fly out of the city, and I went to the washroom, and on the way back down that long hallway again, it became like a total wacky shack, and just everything was the dizziness from before, but significantly worse. And the way I explain it is like, you know those little toys where there's a little silver ball and you try to put it in the divot? There was no divot anymore. So it was just me free falling, like there was no way that was up. And I did the bad thing where I actually lay down in bed, and I was like, maybe this will pass. Maybe this is like a weird inner ear thing or like low blood sugar. I don't know. And luckily, I then got up and I did the FAST test, which is looking for facial asymmetry, lifting your arms to see that they can both be lifted, and talking to hear if your speech is slurred.
So how did you know to do those things?
Because of the scary violin music commercial that you may remember.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So public health messaging works, except so in like the year after I had my strokes, they added BE, so B fast, which is balance and eyesight.
Okay.
So my balance was compromised, but I was able to do all the other things fine. So I was like, well, it's not a stroke.
Oh,
but
so they weren't so valuable. Those commercials.
And so then I managed to. I had broken my cell phone. So I managed to crawl all the way up to my desktop computer, kind of like staggering and holding myself up against things, and get on Google Voice, call my parents, who are not expecting me to call at 6:00 in the morning. And I didn't know what was happening at the time, but they were able to meet up with my partner because we had recently moved in together. They didn't have a key, and get in to see me having the third stroke, which was like this is the one where I would not pass the FAST test. Like total loss of strength on my right side, total loss of sensation on my left side, drooping eye, slurred speech, vomiting profusely. That was a fun one. And just like not even able to keep my head up. So they kind of came in for that one. I don't know if they came in right before or like during, but it was not good.
They caught most of it.
Yeah. And it was not the best look, I gotta say. And they were like, okay, it's ambulance time.
Yes,
and
definitely.
Got me me to the hospital and I got like the full workup. They were able to identify that it was a little tear in my vertebral artery, which is sometimes people have like there's certain types of Ehlers-Danlos that can be more likely to get this, or if you have like certain connective tissue or vascular disorders. But a lot of people are just profoundly unlucky.
Okay.
And sometimes it's like if you've had a more serious tear, like be careful when you do a choking scene.
Could that be from being active in some way?
Yeah, so
like
they think it was like
burlesque?
it was stretching, just like, or like maybe doing some hairography or something.
Yeah,
so
just a little be careful
flip.
with your hair flips.
And I was always so careful, which is why it was extra frustrating. But but yeah, it was really difficult. I lost all this strength, lost all this sensation. My first degree was in opera. I lost one of my vocal cords, so that doesn't work anymore. So not so much with the singing. Yeah, just a ton of like balance-oriented stuff. I couldn't stand. I couldn't use my right hand or just anything on the right side of my body. I couldn't even lift my head up. So spent about 10 days in the hospital. Then I did like a month and a half of rehab and inpatient, and then an additional like 6+ months out of rehab in the rehab setting. It was really hard, and it was really challenging. And through it all, nobody ever talked to me about sex, even though they knew what I did, and I just didn't feel comfortable enough to bring it up. I also, I'm a very open person, but I was not myself. I was just fighting for my life at first, and then I was kind of living in the hospital, which is not the most fun. Doesn't make you feel the vim and vigor you once had, and
or
so,
sexy, or wanting to,
And I just felt like if I alienate my occupational therapist, she's the one I have. If I make it weird for, the administration here, they're going to potentially, like, I mean, worst case scenario, treat me poorly or make it more challenging for me. But at the very least, like, be more on edge. I also didn't get any therapy despite asking relentlessly, because they just identified I wasn't like a serious risk to like their, like I wasn't a suicide risk, and they were that's kind of their bottom line.
Okay.
And aside from that, so I got to see a spiritual counselor the last weekend who was just kind of like, yeah, I don't know if I can really help you. This is sad. Yeah. And
Thanks. So
it was
like
really challenging.
Yeah, a lot of things that at a time where you didn't need things to be more challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why you didn't kind of
I didn't want to rock the boat because the boat was already rocking real good.
So you need to stay on the boat at this point.
Exactly.
You're just like struggling to stay on. So
yes.
When did you start coming to terms with how this was going to impact your sex life?
Well, I actually, my first like goal in rehabilitation, which I set up myself because their goals were like, you need to walk, there's a lot of occupational therapy stuff where you dig your hands into sand and like move cups, so there's a lot of that. Those are their goals, which I get, that's what they are mandated to do. I wanted to go tell my story at Tell Me Something Good.
Great.
And it was hard because at that point I didn't know where I would be, but as it turns out, I just don't have sensation on one side of my body. I'm still really dizzy, still have some eyesight issues, still have the vocal cord issue. Yeah, there are lots of things that remain difficult, but in terms of sex and sexuality, it's that, and then just like major fatigue, which is, it just makes it feel harder to feel sexy, and also like working on your sex life is not the biggest priority because you want to take a nap.
Because you just need to sleep.
Yeah. So that was good, and I talked about it, and I did get a chance to be with my partner, now husband, once before that. So I kind of knew that it would be kind of okay, but not the same. It was frustrating because I was somebody who previously could have, whether you want to call it G-spot, internal, clitoral, whatever, orgasms from the inside. And now I cannot. And I wish that I would have like done some fMRI study. I wish some like young go-getter PhD would have found me, because it would be really interesting to look at, there's actually something
the data
different.
on that.
Yeah. So that was something that was in the back of my mind. And then I did this talk, and then Natalie Rose, who she and her husband Tim Rose used to do the Rose Center for Love, Sex, and Disability. It kind of disbanded a few years ago now, but she's doing her PhD in occupational therapy focused on relationships and sexuality with disability. And so we were friends. She came and brought me the ultimate guide to sex and disability, which is was on Audible, which was useful to me at the time.
Exactly.
Couldn't read, and we just kind of talked about my experience as a sex positive person in an occupational therapy setting. And we kept talking about it, and then we recorded ourselves talking about it, and then we wrote some stuff, and we're actually going to be in the American Journal of Occupational Therapy.
Wow.
It's awkward because it's a full journal piece, and it's academic, but it is just a case study on my sex life.
Wow.
So it's interesting, and that's coming out in the May-June issue.
Wow.
So
amazing.
Since then, I've been able to give a lot of talks at universities with students studying like rehab in their first year of undergrad or their last year of undergrad.
What kind of things do you find yourself talking about?
So I'm the person for like occupational therapy at some universities, and physio and even sometimes speech language pathology. They do like a sex day, and I come in and talk on their sex day.
Yeah.
And I get to be the person who's like, I'm young. It can happen to you. And that's kind of what it is it can happen to you. But I also just talk more generally about the experience of being in rehabilitation. And I also, my own interest, I went back to school to study psychology, is really around relationships. And to a certain extent, sexuality is involved with this, but romantic relationships with people who have either been diagnosed with a chronic illness or a disability and have kind of been through the hospital and rehabilitation program, and how like the concept of caregiver burden is, there's so much writing about that in academia. There are, support groups for that. But being a caregiver and still being a partner, being a caregiver and not feeling like this has to be the worst thing that happens. You can still have a great life with your partner. You can still also date if you're single or if you're poly. There are all these things that are still open to you. But just getting away from this idea that illness or disability means no more sex, no more romance, because if you're in any sort of a caregiving relationship, that's not how it works. So I've been doing a little work so far on addressing that. And we've been able to give talks at a few different conferences, both like medical and caregiving in nature, and then also like sexuality focused ones. So slowly but surely.
Yeah.